al-Assad stresses that Syria will go ahead with dialogue, but is also quite determined to combat terrorism. Jalili says Iran will not allow the breaking of resistance axis in which Syria represents an essential pillar. The Syrian Arab Army deals deadly blows to terrorists in Salah ad-Din neighborhood in Aleppo, killing and wounding large numbers of them. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our news for today. Secretary of the Iranian National Security High Council, Saeed Jalili, has arrived in Baghdad to discuss the situation in the region with a number of Iraqi officials. Jalili had affirmed during his meeting with President Bashar al-Assad yesterday that Iran would not allow at all breaking the resistance axis, of which Syria constitutes an essential part. He pointed out that what was happening in Syria was not an internal issue, but a conflict between the resistance axis and its enemies in the region and the world in a bid to deal a blow to Syria's role of resistance. President al-Assad had stressed during the meeting the determination of the Syrian people and government to purge the country of the terrorists and to combat terrorism without any hesitation. His Excellency affirmed at the same time that Syria would go ahead with national dialogue as Syria is able, with the will of its people, to foil foreign projects which target the axis of resistance in our region and Syria's role therein. In a press conference at the Iranian embassy in Damascus, Jalili said everybody must stand in the way of those who try to obstruct solutions in Syria. He added that democracy does not evolve from centers of hegemony, pointing out that he had a confirmed document that the USA acknowledged the presence of terrorists and their infiltration into Syria to practice violence. Jalili called on all parties to respect Syrian borders, whether materially or morally, asserting that security was indivisible. He emphasized that all the sides that supported the terrorists, whether financially or morally, were direct partners in those heinous acts of shedding the Syrian blood. Jalili pointed out that Annan's plan was the door to a democratic political solution, and all sides which placed obstacles in the way of this should be brought to questioning. Forces today took full control of Salah ad-Din neighborhood in Aleppo, inflicting on the armed terrorist groups heavy losses, killing or wounding a large number of terrorists. Scores of terrorists were arrested, as others turned themselves in and surrendered their weapons. Large quantities of various kinds of arms were confiscated, which the terrorists used in assaulting citizens and perpetrating acts of killing and sabotage. Earlier today, in the War Aghyour and Assijin Street in Aleppo, the authorities carried out a typical operation against armed terrorist groups who had committed crimes and spread panic among citizens. Scores of terrorists were killed or wounded, and 3 pickup trucks provided with Doshka machine guns and a minibus were destroyed. The authorities also chased today an armed terrorist group that used 3 pickup trucks provided with Doshka machine guns and committed acts of killing and sabotage in Bab al-Nayrab neighborhood in Aleppo. The authorities destroyed the 3 cars and killed all their occupants. The authorities and the border guards in Homs suburbs have foiled 2 infiltration attempts by 2 terrorist groups from Lebanon at Adlin and Al-Ghida sites in Telkalakh countryside. The authorities scored direct hits among their ranks. Some terrorists fled back into Lebanese territories. The authorities also ambushed an armed terrorist group that cut off roads and assaulted citizens between Al-Shayhat and Azira villages in Qsir suburbs and were able to kill 10 terrorists and wound others. The Army engineering units today dismantled 4 explosive devices planted by an armed terrorist group on the road between Al-Hawz and Moudan villages in Qsir and Homs. The explosive charges had the shape of barrels that weighed between 50 and 60 kilograms, connected with one another with an electric wire and prepared to be exploded simultaneously. Another evidence to the unlimited support offered by the parties to the conspiracy against Syria to the tools and agents in the country, terrorist Thwaiba Kanafani has admitted receiving training from Turkey to carry out acts of espionage inside a secret center run by the Turkish army. In an interview with the Turkish BBC TV, published by the several Turkish news media, including Yeni Çağ Daily, terrorist Kanafani said she lived in Canada with her family, but she decided to return to Syria to join the gangs of the so-called Free Army last June. She was asked to carry out acts of espionage on Syrian officials, a role she was trained to perform at the aforementioned secret center. Terrorist Kanafani said several members of the so-called Free Army gangs received training at the center, where efforts are exerted to get them prepared. She also referred to military assistance given by Turkey to Free Army gangs, in addition to facilities granted to them in the field of communication, affirming the Qatari and Saudi support for such operations. Russia dismissed media reports alleging that a Russian general was assassinated in Syria, stressing that these reports are baseless. A Russian security source said the retired General Kozhiev, claimed by Syrian opposition to be killed in Syria, is safe and sound, living with his family in Moscow. Kozhiev had worked in Syria as an advisor for the Syrian Defense Minister for Military Affairs, but since his retirement he was living in Moscow and never visited Syria since. On solidarity with the Syrian media, a number of journalists and figures from various media outlets gathered in front of the radio and TV center in Umayyad Square to express support for the national media. The participants in the event voiced strong condemnation of the terrorist act, which targeted the center on August 6th and caused a number of injuries among the staff in addition to material damages. They also expressed determination to continue reporting facts and observe values of objectivity. In Egypt, 20 terrorists were killed and dozens injured following airstrikes by Egyptian warplanes in the Sheikh Zayed region in Sinai Peninsula. Eyewitnesses said the Egyptian military jets pounded several spots in the town of Sheikh Zayed town while chasing suspects. The attacks of 3 joint military police checkpoints late on Tuesday came 2 days after 16 border guards were killed by unknown assailants in an incident that laid bare security problems on the Sinai Peninsula. A resident from Al Arish city was injured in the crossfire as gunmen attacked a Risa checkpoint. The 2 other checkpoints were on the main road between Al Arish and Rafah. No deaths were reported from the checkpoint attacks. Exchanges of fire lasted until the early hours of Wednesday before armored vehicles were sent in an attempt to contain the situation. Finally, in occupied Palestine, Israeli occupation authorities continued the Jihadization policy in the occupied territories as Israeli troops started expanding a settlement unit between Daniel and Ali Hazar settlement complexes erected in the town of Al-Khudr, south of Bethlehem. Palestinian sources warned against such policy, which aims at isolating more than 300 dunams of Palestinian land. With this, we end our news bulletin for today. For more information about Syria and the region, you can visit our website in English, syriaonline.sy. Up next, the latest business and market news with Khalid after the break.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. The Minister of Electricity, Imad Khamis, discussed with the Chinese ambassador to Damascus means of boosting cooperation in the energy domain between Syria and China and ways of completing the ongoing projects between the 2 countries. Both sides reviewed, during the meeting that took place at the Ministry of Electricity today, some cooperation projects and memoranda of understanding which are taking effect currently with some Chinese companies in the domain of generating electricity, in addition to boosting cooperation in the domain of investment in conventional power generation and renewable energy, especially the wind power. On his part, the Chinese ambassador said that the Bank of Export and Import is evaluating bids for investments in renewable energy in Syria, asserting China's commitment to carrying out the joint projects in the best way. The Minister of Agriculture emphasized the importance of boosting cooperation with the United Nations Food and Agricultural Organization, the FAO. The minister said that the assistance is provided by the FAO as part of the development project and technical aid for the farmers and their families and those who were affected by the drought and the natural disasters. He added that the Ministry of Agriculture is also distributing the assistance for the farmers and their families in the rural communities. The Director General of the Real Estate Bank said that the Saving Bank announced its plan to grant loans to the low-income state workers. The manager also pointed out to the possibility of granting loans to the people with limited income due to the need to move the liquidity in the public banks with the rational and well-studied policies. He also pointed out that the best opportunity to move liquidity lies in the loans, which are to the limited income, as no matter how many loan applications were submitted, the amounts remained small, granted, and low risk, in addition to being a social service necessity during the current circumstances. The Custom Directorate has completed the first phase of the system of temporary admission for cars, putting the system into service where this system has become in service in several secretariats of the Custom Department, while other secretariats are preparing the infrastructure for it. The Directorate of the Customs said that the main objective of the application of this system is to save time spent by the travelers at the border centers while entering or leaving the country. The Directorate of Customs also issued a decision that will allow the inspection outside the custom premises for the imports of the owners of the industrial facilities and the goods of nature that cannot be revealed in the custom premises, and also the goods that are ready for export, as well as fruits and vegetables. This decision simplifies the custom procedures and saves time and cost of raw material for industry. It also encourages the exporters. Oil prices are up for the third consecutive day, reaching their highest closing level in 12 weeks, amidst hopes that more economic stimulus by the Federal Reserve, and also due to the decline in the production of the North Sea to a record low during September. The U.S. stock index futures fell, indicating that the Standard & Poor's 500 index will snap a three-day rally as the weakening American demand for oil fueled concerns that the economy is slowing down. The European stocks are also down from a 4-month high as some companies have reported earnings that missed the estimates. The Japanese stocks, on the other hand, are up on speculations that the global central banks will take steps to boost the economic growth. Gold declined for the first time in 4 days in London as the stronger dollar curbed the demand for the metal as an alternative investment. Silver and platinum for immediate delivery fell, while the palladium dropped. The euro weakened as reports showing that the German decline industry production has added evidence that the European sovereign debt crisis is hurting the region's largest economies. The 17-nation currency fell against all but one of its 16 major counterparts, sliding 0.7% versus the yen. The pound also rose against the dollar and the euro after the Bank of England announced that an interest rate cut may be counterproductive. With this, ladies and gentlemen, we have reached the end of our news bulletin for today. Thank you for joining us.